Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. Plus, tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email and you'll be ready to check right in. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code BASEBALL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BASEBALL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Hi there. Welcome into the latest episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. I'm trying to be more settled and calm. It was a wild trade deadline week. Actually, really not as crazy as it could have been, but I'm trying to keep things level-headed. My name is Tyler Ron. Sam Dykstra is in New York City. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Tyler. I legitimately thought a dog had walked into your room and you were just saying hi to Leica.
No, she
approached
the door when I came in here, and as soon as I sat down and got the microphone out, she was like, "Yeah, you're not gonna be able to give me pets," and she just turned around and walked away. I was like, "All right, fine, jerk, whatever."
She knows.
She does. She knows. You're going to be otherwise engaged. You're going to be talking with that guy that I bothered every 5 seconds in the mountains.
No, we had a great time.
I know.
She was like calling
fantastic
for me when I went on,
she was.
on a walk.
Yeah, it was great. She, Sam wandered away from the cabin, was walking back like I could see him coming up the road, and she was barking at him from like half a mile away. Like, where you been? Come on back. I need some pets, pal.
We're over here. We're over here. Find us. Follow my voice. Follow my voice.
Well, hey, welcome into this week's episode of the Show Before the Show podcast. As noted, the official podcast of minor league baseball. My name is Tyler Ron. His name is Sam Dykstra. Benjamin Hill's coming up in a little while. We'll hear from Ben. We'll hear from Josh Jackson. We got a fun interview conversation this week. We'll catch up with Ben on the road in upstate/Western New York. I did not know that there was such a debate over the geographic designations of each, and not living there, I don't even want to wade into it.
Yeah, I think it's technically Central New York. Just before anybody is like yelling at us. I said Western/Central. I have friends who like live in Rochester and they get angry if you say one thing or the other.
But everything outside the city is upstate to people in the city, right? Like anything that you're discussing that's not in metropolitan New York City is all upstate. No?
It's a whole thing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I say it. Upstate starts at Poughkeepsie. You're going to find some people who say upstate starts at 72nd Street.
Yeah, that's true.
They are jerks, so we don't need to acknowledge them. But yeah, it's a fun internet debate that pops up every 6 months, and everybody gets forgets we didn't settle on anything and we move on.
You can post a nice X about it, Sam.
A post as they're called now. And
is that what they're called? I thought they were called X's. They're not called X's?
No, when you click the button now, it says post, and then when you try to retweet something now, it's called repost, which is
dumb.
Yeah,
I'm done. I'm off of it. I'm off.
I know.
Of it.
Yeah,
I've made the clean break. I don't know the logo. I was just like, nah, I'm done with this. This is dumb now.
Hey, I'm still sending you in the mail all of my tweets just so you see them.
Printing them off one by one.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea. I'll put them into my binder, my Sam Tweets archive.
I don't think it's great for the environment that I'm printing out sheets of paper with a single tweet every time.
But just one tweet each.
And they're not even blown up.
They're just like very small in the top corner of the page. It's for anybody who's going to get angry. Sam doesn't actually do it, I promise. But there's always room to evolve on these sorts of topics. Maybe that is something that we discuss going. I did download my data off of it. I was like, you know what? Everything about the way this website is going has the makings of a class action lawsuit. Maybe I'm going to need this someday. Maybe I'm going to be cut in on some big sum of money. Apparently, there was like a big settlement with Meta, and like everybody's eligible for money, although I haven't been on Facebook in like 12 years. But still, maybe this is how we're all getting rich. We're just going to sue the pants off of the social media people.
Yeah, I'm going to still keep working just in case that doesn't work.
Just in case that's not a sound financial plan. Well, if you are somebody who works in the baseball industry, you may have found yourself waking up to the news that you got to go somewhere else to keep plying your trade in the baseball industry. And that is because the 2023 Major League Baseball trade deadline has come and gone. You like that segue? I'm pretty proud of that segue. I got to be honest. That was a nice.
You're messing it up now by acknowledging the segue. Just let the segue.
I just want to be credited for how good that segue was. So I can't even let it pass without.
Tyler, you should feel credited. Now we can.
All right. So the trade deadline is now in the rearview mirror. We did not see some of the potential massive deals that we thought maybe we would see. Obviously, the biggest outlier in all of that being Shohei Ohtani, which, as we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago before he was pulled from the trade market, there would have been no package that could have even approached what Shohei Ohtani is actually worth. It ended up being a moot point anyway. He was not moved. The Angels are going to make a go of it, and we will see how that plays out over the coming weeks and the next really 2 months before we get into postseason play. But there were some top prospects moved, and there were some, I would say, surprising deals. The now richest team in baseball, at least in terms of their ownership, is sort of pulling the plug on trying to contend in the short term. The New York Mets started this season with Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, and both of those guys are gone now. And they have brought back some pretty good prospect talent in return. But, we'll see what that actually means going forward for the Mets. If I was a Mets fan and I knew that my owner had been committed to spending all of the money on the planet in order to try to bring a World Series to Queens, and then all of a sudden just decided one half a season of trying is kind of worth it. And that's that. And we're going to move on now. I probably wouldn't be thrilled. But they did get some very good talent back in exchange for Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander from the two Texas squads, the Rangers and the Astros, respectively. Max Scherzer, now a member of the Texas Rangers, the front-running Texas Rangers for most of this season so far in the American League West, and the Houston Astros, who, of course, as we know, are more than likely to be in the ALCS, if not the World Series, because that's the way things have gone for the last 6-7 years. Sam, these are very interesting deals, and we're not going to evaluate them, of course, from the major league standpoint, but rather from the minor league standpoint and what it means for prospects trading places. You've got a story up on the site, the top 40 prospects traded ahead of the deadline, and that is on MLB Pipeline, and the number one player on that list is a guy who did go to the Mets from the Texas Rangers, and that is Luis Angel Acuna, who is just 21 years old in Double-A. But he's going to be the Mets' top prospect upon your re-rank later on this month. He is obviously one of the highlights, but of the top 5 prospects who were traded, a lot of those guys go into the White Sox, 3 of them, in fact, or 2 of them, in fact. 2 go to the Mets, 1 goes to the Guardians. Give us sort of the 30,000-foot view of the prospects who were moved, and then let's talk some specifics about these guys.
Yeah, so I'm going to not push back against something you said there, but in terms of like Steve Cohen spending all that money in the offseason and then making trades now, it's not ideal. Like the Mets spent all that money to be competitive this year. It wasn't working, but they still used that financial might in these trades. I mean, you get back Luis Angel Acuna, you get back Ryan Clifford, you get back Drew Gilbert from the Astros because they were sending money the other way. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I kind of wonder, especially in that Max Scherzer trade, like how negotiations went, where it was like, all right, we'll throw in this amount of money. Okay, that gets you Sebastian Walcott. All right, we're going to throw in this amount of money. Okay, that gets you Brock Porter. Like they just kept adding money to the point where everybody felt comfortable. Like we can get to Acuna because it was a 1-for-1. There's nobody else involved in that trade. It's Max Scherzer for Luis Angel Acuna. Same thing in the Astros deal involving Justin Verlander. They're sending a lot of money to get back Drew Gilbert, who's a top 100 prospect for us. And Ryan Clifford, who in some eyes is kind of periphery top 100 prospect. I don't think he's going to appear on ours coming up. But I'm fascinated to see how he's going to end the year. He's certainly going to be in the conversation going into the offseason. So they just gave money to get better prospects. And that's one thing the Mets have always talked about since ownership changed, was like, hey, we need to build up this farm system and be competitive. They could have made moves last offseason, which involved trades. Like they could have traded away a Brett Beatty or an Alex Ramirez, or, you know, some of their other deeper names, a Mike Vassell, who's now their top, or going to be their top pitching prospect. They chose to hold on to those guys and spend money instead. Didn't quite work. Now they're trading those guys that they spent money on to build up the farm system even more. One of the tweets I got a lot in the last few hours, or last few days, the last 48 hours, was, are the Mets a top 5 farm system now? Are they a top 10 farm system now? I honestly, it's been a crazy week. I have not sat down and like plotted out where everybody is in terms of farm system rankings, so I don't have a hard answer on that. Is the system improved? Remarkably so. You look at some of the names on that list right now. Kevin Parada, we have as the top prospect right now. He's going to come down off that spot, like you were talking about. Acuna is going to assume number 1. Alex Ramirez has dropped out of the top 100. He's kind of trending the wrong way. I really like Jet Williams. Mike Vassell has certainly improved his stock, but like the system needed to get deeper, and it certainly has, and it has a higher ceiling with guys like Gilbert and Acuna now in there. So I won't say I like the idea of dealing 2 aces, especially Verlander. Like Scherzer's trending the wrong way. He's getting old. That happens.
Right.
He's a future Hall of Famer. Nobody's doubting that, but he was going the wrong way. So to get Acuna for him and all that money is a decent job by the Mets, I think.
Baffling thing, by the way, Scherzer trending the wrong way and getting old. He's actually younger than Justin Verlander, as weird as that is.
Yeah.
Very strange. Very strange.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, they're 2 incredible generational talents. And yet nobody's doubting that. But obviously
Cooperstown first ballot.
Right.
Yeah.
And those guys are, they have written just about everything in their stories that you could possibly want in a major league career. It's not done yet. But those are 2 guys who are sort of entering those twilight stages or in the twilight stage of their professional careers.
Yeah. And one other trade I want to just, while we're talking about the Mets, just kind of hone in on real quick, was they traded David Robertson, who was their closer this year because of the Edwin Diaz injury. And they flipped him. He was essentially a rental. He's going to be a free agent in the offseason. For Marco Vargas and another catcher at the complex level. But Marco Vargas, I know some other places which do really good work, and we can disagree on this stuff for now, and that's fine. Marco Vargas isn't the top 100 guy now. He's probably going to have to perform at a full season level before we give that a full send. But if you want to get on the ground floor of somebody, he's somebody to do it with. I was really actually surprised that the Marlins were willing to trade him for David Robertson and another prospect. The guy makes really good swing decisions. He's getting on base close to half the time as a teenager who just moved stateside. Usually you see that culture shock. There's a little bit of time to adjust. He's looking like somebody who should see St. Lucie, and I mean single A St. Lucie, by the end of the season. It's been really shocking to see how good he's been this year. So to get him really deepens that system and adds some ceiling too. So I think the Mets did pretty well. You look at the White Sox, who you mentioned too, like it's kind of depressing to me because I think the White Sox for years, we were like, hey, they're building up something here.
This is the next team. This team is going to be a force.
Jimenez, Luis Robert, who Luis Robert is clearly their superstar, like is very good. But like Nick Madrigal didn't turn out as they were hoping.
Yohan Moncada.
Andrew Vaughn's a contributor, but isn't great. Moncada's been hurt a decent amount, and it certainly hasn't met the ceiling that everybody expected at him when he signed with the Red Sox all those years ago. Michael Kopech, I don't know if people ever thought he was going to be an ace, but like isn't quite there. Dylan Cease is a good pitcher, but they were going the wrong way. So now they're kind of starting a rebuild again. And I wouldn't say there's anybody here that's like, oh, now he's their top prospect. Like nobody was going to take down Colson Montgomery, or very few could take down Colson Montgomery. But you look at who they got, like Edgar Caro, who's going to be their number 2 prospect now. They got him the Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez deal. I like him to a certain extent. The Angels were certainly aggressive in sending him to Double-A, and he was getting on base there, but his slugging was going the wrong direction. He's not necessarily a great defensive catcher. So if you believe in the bat And the fact that he's handled himself pretty well at such a young age, at an advanced level, like there's something to like there. But I'm just not a huge. He's probably coming down off the top 100, or not off the top 100, but he's moving down it, I should say, when we do our update. I do like that they got Jake Eater. I don't love that they traded Jake Berger to get Jake Eater, but that's kind of a trade that I think hurts both sides.
You think that you would think that if you were the eater, you would consume the burger.
Yes. Eaters and burgers should be together.
Jake's. Right, exactly. Like it seems like such a logical next. Oh, I'm so sorry to both the eater and burger families for that joke. That was terrible. I heard Ben and Sam make some cringeworthy jokes that you'll hear later on in this episode, and I had to jump on the bandwagon, but I did it first, and mine was worse, and I'm regretting this already.
This is why we record in the order that we do, just so we can get our bad stuff out early, but late for the listener.
But it airs later, and I take the fall.
We're playing 4D chess, is all I'm saying. But like Jake Berger hits the ball really hard. I kind of like that the Marlins, who I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year, but like they are going for it. They made moves to go for it. Good for them. Getting Robertson, getting Berger, making some other deals. But yeah, Jake Eater, somebody who had Tommy John surgery a while back, broke his foot, I think, in the spring, and was missing additional time on top of that. But when he's on, the fastball and slider can really get swing and miss. He was showing it recently at Double-A. So it almost feels like the White Sox are kind of buying low on him. Like he was just back on the upswing. And he was a top 100 prospect at one point before the Tommy John surgery. Could very well end up trending back there, although he's getting on the older side. But by the time he makes his debut on the South Side, his stock might be fully back up. So like the White Sox, it's not a fully remade system. I don't want to go that far, but they added some pieces. It's kind of depressing, like you were saying. That you were hopeful that this young core could get them over the top, especially in a weak AL Central, and it just hasn't happened.
The other team that really pops up in these rankings a lot, I mean, there are a few, and obviously it's going to be the teams who have acquired talent because they were movers at the deadline. But the Guardians are in there a good amount. The Guardians brought back some prospect talent. The Tigers brought back, I think, some really interesting prospects in their deals. But one team that I think people are probably most baffled by being in the position that they're in 2023 is the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, they didn't move Paul Goldschmidt. They didn't move Nolan Arenado, but they did move Jordan Hicks. They moved Jordan Montgomery, Chris Stratton. They brought back some good pieces, but man, there were not a lot of people at the beginning of the season who would have expected the Cardinals of all teams to be offloading assets and acquiring prospect talent in the mode of a rebuild at the deadline this year.
Yeah. I mean, this was shocking that they got to this point. As the season went on, it's not shocking that they did it. Especially the people.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Yeah, like Jack Flaherty is going to be a free agent this offseason. It's going to be weird to see him in a Baltimore Orioles jersey for sure. But the fact that they traded him and got 3 prospects back is like something. And they had to walk that line, right? Like there were rumors of Nolan Arenado going to the Dodgers that never went anywhere. And I don't think they were really going to pull that ripcord, because as long as they can get some pitching back, and I think get a little bit of better luck, get everybody on the same page, make some interesting moves in the offseason, the Cardinals could be right back there, because AL Central is like a very easily winnable division, but so is the NL Central right now.
Yeah.
Brewers and Reds are having good years, but anybody really could have taken that. So the moves that they made really helped stockpile their arms, getting Tekoa Robbie, Sam Reversa. That I think those are some pretty big ones. I like Adam Klopfenstein, although we have him ranked at number 22 now. Zach Showalter, who they got from the Orioles, has some really interesting traits with the way he throws the ball, and has a plus fastball and an interesting slider. I don't know if I would go above average on it quite yet, but there's some interesting stuff there for a guy who's 19 years old. And like, I feel like for years we've talked about the Cardinals as a relatively deep system, and it was going the other way now. When you graduate Jordan Walker, some of their arms haven't really pushed through. Gordon Graceffo was like top 100 guy to begin the year. He's come off since. Michael McGreevy is a strike thrower, but doesn't really have impressive stuff. Getting somebody like Roby, he has that ceiling. Now he's dealing with a shoulder issue now, and the injuries have always been a concern, but like this Cardinal system feels more robust. it feels closer to what the Cardinals' MO has always been, which is like, we're going to develop guys and then we'll get other stars to fill in the pieces, and we'll have that homegrown and stars feeling. I don't know if they're quite there yet, but the pieces are there for them to be a little bit more interesting. And again, like without sacrificing the long-term future of the club. So yeah, their top 30 is certainly deeper. I am working through right now trying to rank it, and like adding all these new guys to the mix has been fascinating, because it's just like, well, I really like him and I really like him. And it's not, they didn't add any top 100 names, but it's deeper. And that can only be a good thing for a system that was thinning out pretty quick.
All right, Sam, among these 40 or anybody else who was traded at the deadline, who is kind of the sneaky one that you're keeping an eye on as a potential eye-opening prospect? There's a guy on this list who, as we discussed prior to the season, is a prospect that I love. I picked as a breakout guy. That's Hao-Yu Lee, who got sent to the Detroit Tigers from the Philadelphia Phillies in the Michael Lorenzen trade. You've got him at number 9 on this list. He's the number 6 prospect in that Tiger system now. But there are some other guys, further down the list. The Mariners made a deal sending Paul Sewald out, which was kind of a head scratcher. Paul Sewald has been really successful there. That's a team that's right in the hunt for a wild card spot, still in the mix for the division as well. They're only 6 games back, but they turned a closer into some prospects, sending him to the D-backs in exchange for some minor league talent. Are there people who right now you look at this list and think he's not the headliner at the moment, but a few years from now, this guy could be a dude for one of these organizations?
Yeah, there are a few I'll throw out real quick, just piggybacking off what you were saying from the Mariners. I know there are people who like Dominic Canzone, but I kind of liked Ryan Bliss a little bit more. And I know I'm a little bit out on an island there. Dominic Canzone's like had a great year at AAA and has been productive at the major league level, so he can help Seattle immediately. I get that. But like Ryan Bliss was having a breakout season. He's really struggled in 2022. And I talked to him when I was in Amarillo because he was turning things around real quick, even though they promoted him from high A to double A. And he said he was getting too steep in his swing path. It was causing him to hit catchable fly balls. That was hurting his batting average. He's somebody that plays a capable second base. He can even fill in at shortstop, but really needed to hit and was doing a much better job at that this year. So I think the Mariners are getting him at a good time. I was actually talking to a D-back source this week, and I was asking, like, who do you think in the system took a step forward this year? And he's like, well, I was going to say Ryan Bliss. And then, and I was like, I know, I wanted to rank him for Arizona and I no longer can. So I don't know if we're going to look back at it as the Ryan Bliss trade. I mean, the power isn't really special, but the contact rate has improved. The quality of contact has improved. He could be a potential long-term second baseman for Seattle, which is a pretty good get for a reliever. Another one I'll throw out there, and this trade kind of baffled me a little bit, was the Red Sox acquired Luis Urias from Milwaukee. Now, Luis Urias, I just saw in Nashville, and it kind of felt like he was surplus to requirements for Milwaukee. And yet the Red Sox traded a prospect who was going to go on their top 30 list. He's now number 15 for Milwaukee. Bradley Blaylock, who was a 32nd round pick in 2019. That round doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But the Red Sox talked him out of a Kennesaw State commitment with a $250,000 signing bonus. So he got paid like a much higher round pick. But he was coming off Tommy John surgery. The stuff has actually looked pretty good so far this year between single A and high A. He's got a fastball around 93 to 96 miles an hour. Getting some info from his time in the Red Sox, there are certain people there who prefer his slider. Milwaukee, when they acquired him, they singled out his power curveball as one of their favorite pitches for him. But he's somebody who's just regaining his stuff. He's coming back from Tommy John and has been really successful and instantly plugs in as like one of the more promising arms in that Milwaukee system. So to get him for Urias, who I don't think was going to contribute meaningful at bats to a contending club this year.
Well, and
who's a little bit more of a project.
Already immediately optioned down to Worcester, I believe, correct? So it's not as though it's a move where you're adding a depth piece at the major league level because you're in need of someone who, is going to be there. And obviously that division is in a bizarre circumstance right now. Everybody is at least 4 games over 500. The Red Sox are 6 games over. They're only 9 games back in the division. But to have gone out and made a move And then all of a sudden, that move is kind of strange in its own right. And then immediately you just turn a guy right back down to AAA it was a strange.
I think that's more of a paper move for now.
Could be.
Because he was at Nashville, like you just transfer over.
Right.
You don't want, he doesn't get called up immediately. And we'll see where things are going to shake out. I can't imagine. Maybe he has to officially join the Worcester roster, but I can't imagine he's going to be there for long. But still, it was just a fascinating deal on both sides, because we didn't expect the Brewers to be sellers, but if there was an opportunity and they get another pitching prospect, that's pretty good. So keep an eye on Blaylock and Bliss, I think.
So Major League Baseball's trade deadline in the books, which means it is now the final countdown. This really is a very exciting time of the year. Obviously, rules have changed as far as roster expansion on September 1st and blah, blah, blah. But this is when you really see the teams that are serious about contending, the teams that are serious about building something for the future. They now have a clear runway to the end of the year. And if you're a team that's in the hunt, we got some really fascinating postseason races right now. The wild card races obviously have turned into something that gives so many teams hope headed toward September and October, that you can play your way into the postseason and get that boost for the organization that comes along with a playoff berth. And then there are other organizations that we're seeing now taking that step to realizing, no, maybe we are in a rebuild situation. Maybe we are a team that needs to look 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And then there are some teams that are, still just kind of hanging around being teams and with plans that are questionable. But this is a fun time of year when that is past and what you've got going forward toward September and October with playoff races now fully throttled, I guess. I don't even know if that made sense. But Sam, if you had to pick right now, I'm not gonna put you on this.
No, go. Let's do it.
I was gonna say we're in. We've got those. If the season ended today, graphics with here's your wild card matchups. Here's the teams that are going to be waiting for the wild card winners. Is there a team right now that you think could shock you into? I'm thinking about teams that are kind of hanging around. The Chicago Cubs. They didn't trade away Cody Bellinger because that team is alive. They're 3 games back in the National League Central. There was nothing early on this year that suggested that the Cubs were going to be a contender for that division, except for the fact the division is not very good. The Reds are leading that division. The Pittsburgh Pirates, they started the season so well. There's a little bit of hope in Pittsburgh, probably not for the playoffs this year, but I think there's something to be said for the fact that maybe the Pirates have something going on over the next couple of years. The White Sox seem to have bailed on contending this season. Now, Liam Hendricks, as though that guy hasn't been through enough. Now he's got to have Tommy John surgery. The Tigers, I don't know if we will ever figure out what the Tigers are at this stage. Those divisions are very strange. The wild card races are very strange. Everybody in the American League East looks like a potential playoff team. They can't all make the playoffs. Is there a storyline that you think come October 1st, we're going to be like, holy cow, that team made the playoffs?
I'll put it this way, because this team is going to make the playoffs. I feel confident in that. I think the team that we might look at and be like, oh man, they were more of a juggernaut than we were expecting, is the Orioles. And I say that
24 games over 500 right now. They are 66-42. How much fun are and they're doing it, by the way, with a plus 57 run differential. They're a game and a half better than the Rays, who have a plus 137 run differential. That's how the Orioles have been winning games this year. They've been doing things close. They've been playing thrilling baseball. That race between those two teams alone is super fun. And then you throw in the fact that the Jays are only 6.5 back. Boston's 9 back. The Yankees are 10 back. Man, the Orioles, how much fun are the Orioles? I'm excited to see Jack Flaherty on that team.
Right. And I don't bring up the Orioles to be like, oh, it's a hot take that the Orioles are going to make the playoffs and we're going to be surprised by that. I think what might be surprising is that they could still win that division, because there was a lot, and I'll include myself in this. I fully expected them to go for a big trade for a pitcher. And Jack Flaherty is a good get, but he's not your ace. That's not why you go out and get Jack Flaherty at this stage in his career. So they didn't make moves. And the Orioles, at least publicly, kept saying, hey, one reason why we might not make a big splash here and cash in Colton Cowser or Jordan Westberg or some of these young bats that we have at the upper levels, because there's a real logjam up there, is because they have a good core, and those guys like playing together, and you see that. I mean, they've been one of the most fun teams to watch this year.
Yeah.
The bird bath is hilarious. All the stuff they do in the dugout. There's a real cohesive unit there, and I think there's something to be said for that. Now, I would have liked to have seen them be in for like Eduardo Rodriguez. Maybe, he said no to a Dodgers trade, and that's because he wanted to stay home. That's fine. Like, maybe the Orioles approached him and it didn't work either. I don't know. I don't have any info on that. But the Orioles were quieter than I think many were expecting. And yet I think they could still win that division and be playing for an ALCS. Like that could be pretty crazy just to see that rebuild work as well as it has. Now, they could get swept in the ALCS if like they don't have the arms and they run up against. I tweeted out this suggestion, like, can you imagine Justin Verlander throwing to Adley Rutschman in game 1 of the ALCS? How cool would that be at Camden Yards? It might come out that he's pitching to Adley Rutschman, but Adley Rutschman might be in the box.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's going to be a tough look for Baltimore when we get there. But the fact that we're having this conversation of like, why is Baltimore not buying?
Yeah,
is such a crazy flip from where we were 18 months ago. And they might be getting a really good version of Grayson Rodriguez right now. It seems like some of the minors adjustments that he made are working, and that could be really special too. He was supposed to be their ace for a while. It hasn't quite worked out that way, but he's still plenty young, and get him on the upswing going into the playoffs, and that's a big get in its own right.
Well, we are set for a very fun next couple of months of Major League Baseball and minor league baseball. And of course, you can read Sam's story about the top prospects traded at the MLB trade deadline here in 2023 at MLB Pipeline. And coming up, our interview conversation for this week, which I was not present for, but is a very fun conversation. Sam, tee it up for us.
Yeah, so obviously the Defenders of the Diamond series this year in minor league baseball has been one of Milb's biggest initiatives in terms of themed entertainment. So we brought on Brian Crosby, who has a baseball background in his own right, and we'll let him tell that story here very shortly. But he's the director of themed entertainment for Marvel. And he's been heavily involved in some of the logos, in the whole theme across minor league baseball and the teams that have chosen to do Marvelized logos for this season. So here's me and Ben talking to Brian Crosby.
While I'm out enjoying my favorite summer activities, I know I can count on T-Mobile to help keep me connected. T-Mobile is America's largest 5G network. Their network is bigger than Verizon and AT&T's combined. And with their new plan, Go 5G Plus, new and existing T-Mobile customers always get the same great device deals. And when you want a new phone, you can be upgrade ready in 2 years instead of 3. Visit your neighborhood store or T-Mobile.com to find out more. Qualifying service required. See 5G coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
Well, we're really pleased on this week's edition of the Show Before the Show to be joined by Brian Crosby, who is the director of themed entertainment for Marvel. And as many of you out there know, listeners, this is the start of the Defenders of the Diamond initiative this year, seeing Marvelized logos on minor league baseball fields. Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So let's kind of get into, how this partnership kind of started. What's your background in Marvel and in baseball in general?
Sure. Well, that's a long answer.
Yeah, no, that's a very long, complicated process.
Those things. But let's go back in the Wayback Machine here for a second. So my background, I've been the director of themed entertainment for Marvel for about 8 years now. And my responsibilities are really to help oversee the creative execution of any of our events and experiences, whether they be traveling or stationary or permanent, whatever, and make sure that those look great and are great representatives of the Marvel brand, and make sure they're engaging and fun for fans to participate in. But prior to coming to Marvel, I was an Imagineer for Walt Disney Imagineering. I was a concept designer there, so I was designing attractions and experiences, and that's what kind of led me into this role at Marvel. And in the past few years, we've been really getting heavily involved in professional sports and how we can do these Marvel superhero days and make them more engaging for fans. allow for Marvel to grow our fan base with those who might be sports fans, and maybe draw some more Marvel fans to sporting events, and then hopefully turn some of the sports fans into Marvel fans. So it's been this great kind of synergistic relationship that we've had with all of the various professional sports leagues. And so with minor league baseball, we wanted to try something a little bit different. So it was really with the Marvel's Defenders of the Diamond program, it was less about infusing Marvel characters or intellectual property, if you will, into minor league baseball, and more about what would kind of reimagining each of the different minor league baseball programs through the lens of Marvel creators. So thinking differently about the logos and the mascots and things like that. So kind of creating not totally new identities, but creating a new logo that would be handled by a Marvel artist. So this was a fun challenge for us to think a little bit differently about how we would handle a sports activation.
Yeah, and we should also mention your family has a deep background in baseball. Your brother, currently the manager of the Midland Rockhounds. Your other brother got drafted by the A's. When you found out that this was going to be a partnership, I mean, what was the family reaction?
Well, the family reaction was I feel like I finally got approval from my father and my brothers as to what I do for a living. Being that I was the black sheep of the family that didn't get into baseball, my father played in the major leagues from 1971 to about 1978 with St. Louis and Cincinnati and Cleveland, with a few little pit stops at some other organizations in between. Then you mentioned my brother Bobby, who was played for the Oakland A's and the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Arizona Diamondbacks, and is now the manager of the Midland Rockhounds. And my other brother Blake, he's a scout with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So everybody got into baseball, and I was the weird one that started drawing and getting into comic books and superheroes and that kind of thing. So yeah, finally blend what I do for a living with what my brothers and my family, my father, have done for a living, and create one kind of new baby was a lot of fun. And and I love the game, so it was great. It was a great fun for me too to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, that's some synergy right there to combine the family background. And I guess you no longer have the black sheep status if you're working in the world of sports. And in the world of sports, especially at the major league levels, sometimes the athletes themselves are really the heroes or the superheroes. But in minor league baseball, where the players come and go, there's a lot more roster churn. The heroes are often the mascots and based on these logos. So it seems like a world that is ripe for Marvelization. I don't know if that's the verb we use, but to really take the existing logos and visual nature of minor league baseball and work with that. So what was that process like with working with the clubs, the collaborative process? Obviously different clubs operate in different ways, have different visions, different aesthetics, but what was the basic process like in working with a club and going back and forth to create these logos?
Sure. Well, as an artist myself, before I ever put pencil to paper and start drawing anything, I think an extensive deep dive into whatever that topic is, become subject matter experts, if you will. And so I think for this program, what we wanted to do is really connect with the teams and understand what was important to them. Understand a little bit about the city. What were some core attributes that they identified with? What were their key colors and existing logos and things like that? Really understand the makeup of each of these teams, so that when we did put pencil to paper and start drawing something new, it was still evocative of their identity as both a city and a community, as well as a team. And so we did that deep dive with each one of the 96 different teams. And it was really educational for us to learn about all these different cities and kind of what they identify with, and that really made it fun. So that we weren't drifting too far off the ranch with any one of them, but that we were doing something that spoke to them and spoke to their fan base. But again, through the Marvel lens. So we did that deep dive research wise, and then we'd start to ideate and do a few different sketches of each logo. We usually would do most of them were about 3 to 4, maybe 5 sketches of each logo, really different, show some different options, present it back to the team, let them respond and react. And then once we kind of felt like we were in the ballpark, so to speak, in terms of what the logo was going to be, then our artists, and I was one of them, would start to really flesh that out and come up with a design that we'd be excited about. But then I think, also working with minor league baseball in general, because we hadn't necessarily designed for hats, so that was a change for us. We have done some headwear and things like that, but I think for our artists, we were largely using people who came from the world of comic books, who were used to drawing something that's going to be on the printed page, but drawing something that needs to be stitched onto a hat was a different mentality. We had to, in some cases, simplify some of our designs, be bigger and bolder with our design choices and the shape choices that we made. So that was a little bit of a challenge as well. But all good creative boundaries to try and work within to create something new and exciting.
Yeah, and for you as an artist, is this kind of an issue that you dealt with before? Doing things like hats instead of the printed page. Were there adjustments to your own style and the way you did art that maybe you hadn't done before prior to this project?
It was for me, yeah, for sure. I had never had to make an adjustment exactly like this before in anything that I've done. So it allowed me to flex some new creative muscles and try something different. But anything like this, any project like this is always a collaboration. It's always, it's never one person isolated alone doing a thing. It's a team effort. And so having to rely on the teams for critical feedback, and to minor league baseball to help us, work through the design challenges of creating something that was going to live on a hat and be stitched. That was all, great for us, and really challenged me to think differently about my own art style and do something that would work for this particular medium.
Yeah, and you touched on something interesting there in terms of, each team has its own history. And when you guys are designing things for comic books, you're dealing with canon. You're dealing with comic book history. How similar were those things where there was like, hey, listen, there are certain rules for Captain America that you just can't break. There are certain rules for Team X you can't break. How similar was that aspect?
I don't know that it was similar exactly, but I think, I do frequently like to have some kind of creative boundaries to work within. I think a popular phrase that people like to use is, we're going to think outside the box. But in order to think outside the box, you have to first know what the box is. Right. You have to know, like, here are the guidelines, here are the boundaries, here's kind of where we want to be. And then we can see where we can push it a little bit, do something that maybe is a little bit more dynamic, nudge it a little bit in one direction versus another. But I think knowing what those guidelines are helpful, and in some cases can inspire new creativity, because it's not a complete blue sky, like it could be anything. That is, to me, sometimes more challenging, when something can be anything versus like it needs to be this, it needs to be something in this area. So now I got to come up with creative solutions. So it was similar in that we were leveraging existing characters and colors. So, I think, you talked about the Marvel history. Anybody who works at Marvel recognizes that we are standing on the shoulders of giants who came before us and created all of these amazing characters. And we're the current torchbearers to create something new and exciting, but still remains true to who those characters are, and not, stretch the toys, play with them, rough them up a little bit, but don't break them. Don't break the toys. And so, I think those are confines we're used to working in. And so doing this was similar in that way, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one other aspect I'm interested to hear you talk about is in terms of that balance of trying to like Marvelize an already existing thing on their side, or trying to baseball. I don't know if this is a
baseballize.
Yeah, baseballize a Marvel thing. And the two examples I'll provide is Reno. It's Mr. Baseball, who already exists in the ballpark, now becoming a superhero, versus Rocket City, which is just, it looks exactly like Rocket Raccoon, and it's a perfect fit. How did you strike that balance when you were talking to the clubs?
Well, I think it was important that we stayed true to like I said, those team identities. And we didn't want to necessarily go the the route of turning everything into a superhero, which I think can frequently get you into kind of like a stereotypical space of, everybody's got to have a mask and everybody's got to have a cape and everybody's flying. And like, there are some comic book tropes or superhero tropes that we, in some cases, leaned into, and in some cases we tried to avoid. And I think it's really just about finding the right tone for each of these teams. Some of them lent themselves to leaning into those tropes, and some didn't. And I think what we tried to avoid, generally speaking, was doing anything that was an exact lift of an existing Marvel character. So we were not trying to make a team look like, it's kind of like Captain America. We were trying to create something new. So we almost tried to avoid thinking about Marvel intellectual property and more just bring our sensibilities of design and story to each of these projects. So thinking about them as a completely new character was what made it fun and exciting for us.
Yeah, and given your background and your family's baseball background, were there any teams you got to work with that you kind of knew going in, or you were particularly excited about, being like, oh wow, I get to put my stamp on this team, it's one I'm familiar with or one I grew up with, or that kind of thing? Was there personal connections with some of these?
Yeah, I mean, I I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I was excited to jump in with the Midland Rockhounds. Just
of course,
that's where my brother is. So I did draw that one, and so I was really excited to do that and to have my brother out there wearing the jersey and hat that I had designed. That was really kind of fun for me. And then a lot of the teams that like I said, I'm from Southern California. I'm an Angel fan. So, doing some of the farm teams for the Angels was cool too. But other than that, I think it was just, which, as I looked through the list, it was looking at some that spoke to me or I felt like I had a real take on, and being able to bring my own sensibilities to each of those designs. But, I'm precious about all of them, but especially the ones that I had a hand in drawing myself.
Yeah, and a lot of these minor league teams and the names and logos they already have, have pretty elaborate backstories and kind of zany names, and big part of our jobs is trying to explain and contextualize this often confusing universe for people who are trying to learn more about it. Did you have those kind of experiences as well, where maybe a team you weren't as familiar with, where you kind of really had to do a crash course and wait, why are they the trash pandas or whatever the case may be?
For sure, yeah, and there's some that lend themselves really well to a character of sorts, that so you mentioned the trash pandas or like the Salt Lake Bees, where it's like, oh, I see you have a character already, and then we can take that and make it look like something that came from a Marvel hand. And others it was a little bit more ambiguous, that were a little bit more challenging, like the Stockton ports. It was like how do you make that? How do you to use your phrase, how do you Marvelize that? And so a lot of times we were looking at beyond just the name, but the mascots and things like that, that they had maybe running around, or the Inland Empire 66ers, like how do you Marvelize that as a logo? So some of them were a bit more challenging than others, where there wasn't an obvious character that would come with it. But again, those were creative challenges that we tried to rise to.
Yeah, and the Stockton logo and character you're talking about, he is would you call him a superhero of asparagus? So these are the sort of things you learn in minor league baseball. Stockton,
yeah.
Stockton,
definitely, I did draw that one, and so that's why I can speak specifically to it. But that was one that I wasn't super sure about it, but it resonated with the team, and I'm glad they liked it.
Yeah,
and hopefully it resonates with the fans, right? I mean,
right.
The fans tell us if we've succeeded or not. I think anytime we come out with a new film or a new comic book project or a new video game, like, the fans are not shy about telling us, if they dig what we're doing, if they dig the characters we've created, if they dig the story we're telling, and then they want to extend beyond just that story and buy the t-shirt or buy the jacket or whatever, buy the action figure. So hopefully the fans dig what we've created, and they are they're wanting to represent these different logos, and whether they know they're Marvel or not, I hope they do. But hopefully they just think it looks cool and it's something they want to represent.
Yeah, and you talked before about your excitement about seeing and working with Angels affiliates. You got to go to a game in Salt Lake recently, right?
I did, yeah. That was a lot of fun. So I have family and friends up in the Salt Lake area, so that was a lot of fun to go up there and did a signing and got to throw out the first pitch and see the players wearing the Salt Lake Bees gear, and I did a little how to draw of that logo. So that I had a lot of fun up in Salt Lake.
Yeah, and then speaking of doing like how to draws and stuff like that, I mean, is there any part of you that looks at hats now, whether it's minor leagues, whether it's any sport team, and see their logo and be like, I want to crack at that. I know exactly what I would do. Like, is there any part of you that finds that difficult to turn off of how now that you've done this for so many clubs?
Yes. Much like, as I mentioned, my background, in theme park design, that part of you is not only hard to turn off, I would say it's impossible to turn off.
Right.
Yeah.
You look at everything experientially, and this kind of thing, this drives my wife crazy, by the way, just because, I'm it's like I have half of my brain is always there. We go and do something like, wouldn't that be cool if we did this, turn this into an experience, or that might solve a problem we had for another project. But having now been able to play in this sandbox and to try something new with designing hats, there are some logos and hats that I see around not just minor league baseball but professional sports that I maybe have some thoughts on.
Well, who knows what the possibilities are, and
that's right.
All of the multiverses and universes that could present those opportunities for you. But
look, I never would have thought in a million years when I started drawing at Disney that somehow, some way, I would end up here at Marvel and working with minor league baseball. Like,
right.
Yeah, pretty
several times throughout this project, I would turn to my partners and go like, how did we get here? Like, how did we end up in this place where this is what we're doing, and how cool is this? So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we say the same thing to ourselves quite a bit.
Yeah,
like, whoa, what?
It's the beauty of minor league baseball and Marvel. It's the type of crossover event we can all get behind. Well, Brian Crosby, thank you so much for joining us here on the show, and thanks for your work so far in all this and everything moving forward with Defenders of the Diamond.
My pleasure, and thank you again for having me. It's been fun.
Well, now we pivot to one of my favorite segments that we get to do here on the show, because every week we have Benjamin Hill on to talk about his trips. And every once in a while we get to catch him during a trip, which is what we are doing this week. Ben has been traveling so far this week to Syracuse and Binghamton. He has stops coming up. He's actually driving right after this call to Scranton, Pennsylvania, or Moosic, Pennsylvania, if you want to be even more specific. But Ben, you are currently in a park in Binghamton outside a carousel, which holds a special place for the name of the Rumble Ponies.
That's also that's the creepiest description we've ever had of where Ben is, by the way.
You're
also in a park hanging outside a carousel, aren't you?
This is true, and it's going to get creepier. So stay tuned.
Well, how are you, Ben? How's everything on the road so far?
Yeah, it's been going great. Like you said, I've seen games in Syracuse and Binghamton, and now I am in Binghamton's Recreation Park, because this is the site of one of 6 carousels in the Binghamton area. And because there's so many carousels in the Binghamton area, that's what inspired the name of the minor league team, AA affiliate of the Mets, the Rumble Ponies, the Rumble Pony being a carousel horse. And the reason there's so many carousels in Binghamton is because a wealthy industrialist, businessman, whoever, from many, many years ago, I think his name was George Endicott. I got to look into that. But, he made a lot of money in the region, and this is a gift to the community, is all these various carousels, which, again, inspired the team name. But this carousel that I chose, that I'm standing by right now, that I wanted to visit before I left Binghamton, has another connection in that Rod Serling, creator of the Twilight Zone, grew up in Binghamton. And this carousel, which is to my right, and a gazebo that is to my left, play prominently in the Twilight Zone episode Walking Distance, in which a man returns to his hometown and finds nothing has changed. And it's, of course, unsettling and creepy. So I'm standing here by this carousel that was in the Twilight Zone episode and a gazebo that was in the Twilight Zone episode. The gazebo's seen better days, but it has a plaque right in the center that says Rod Serling, creator of Twilight Zone, Walking Distance. So, yeah, a lot of American history to digest right here as I stand at Recreation Park in Binghamton, New York.
Yeah, that's great. And let's start with your first stop on this tour in Syracuse. You know, going to see the Mets there, their AAA affiliate. You are currently in the home of their AA affiliate. What stood out to you about the trip to see the Syracuse Mets?
Yeah, you know, it's only been 4 years since I've been to Syracuse, which by my standards, trying to visit as many places as I can, the relative blink of an eye. But in that time, the team has done a lot of improvements to their home of NBT Bank Stadium. These were improvements that got underway even before the reorganization of the minor league baseball and the new facility standards. It was designed to be a project that took place over the 2020 season of 2021. But then, of course, 2020 didn't happen. So that worked out for the team in the sense that they were able to keep improving the stadium while they didn't have a season going on. And I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of gallons of paint they must have used with so much orange and blue coloring now throughout the ballpark, representing the Mets colors, of course. There's a new bullpen bar in left field, a new deck in right field, and below the deck is a team Hall of Fame because, you know, baseball in Syracuse goes back to the 1870s. There's a lot of history, and it's cool to now, you know, dedicated history area that's open to the public. So that ballpark, which opened the better part of 30 years ago, I think in 1995, 96, you know, is looking really good these days. And it was great to be in Syracuse. Spent a lot of time with the GM, Jason Smorrell, one of the more exuberant general managers in minor league baseball. Always great to see him. You know, got a tour of the facility. Spent a good amount of time with my designated eater, a guy named Eric Silfies, and his friend. What was his friend's name? I'm sorry, friend of designated eater. I'm forgetting. But they're both engineering students at Syracuse University. And pierogi. There's something I learned about pierogi. There's never a plural. So even if you are eating multiple pierogi, it's just pierogi. It's not pierogies. And that's something I learned and that Jason, the GM, was very adamant about. But they serve pierogies pierogi at the ballpark in deep fried varieties and in regular varieties. Have a standalone stand. I think that was one of the highlights of the food. And I talked to some longtime season ticket holders who also work at the team's Hall of Fame, who share their love of the team through working in the Hall of Fame and sharing the history of the ballpark. So, you know, that night in Syracuse flew right by. Great to see people again and meet people and see some pierogi, learn about pierogi, no plural.
Well, Ben, to be in that area and to be able to explore, I don't say certainly not one of the forgotten areas of minor league baseball, but it's one of the places that I think has some of the earliest history in minor league baseball. What are minor league baseball fans like in upstate New York? Because it's something where, you know, those franchises have been around since, in a lot of cases, at least in some iteration, and since the late 1800s. It's such a different established minor league baseball culture. And obviously you've been up there a bunch of times, but what is that like for fans who have not been to, you know, Binghamton or Syracuse or Rochester or elsewhere? What are fans like, and what is the feeling like when you go to a game there compared to, say, a game in the Southeast or a game out in the West Coast?
Yeah, you know, I find in like the Southeast and in some of the comparatively newer environments, especially newer ballparks, you have, you know, louder stadiums, maybe more like intense fan bases, just in terms of you know, coming out the ballpark and yelling a lot and just being really into, you know, the sensory overload of the music over the PA and the video board and everything going on. You know, I see that culture more in the South and Southeast. Here, yeah, you do have these teams that go back to the 19th century, these communities where they just passed on baseball from generation to generation to generation. A history with some of these teams like Rochester and Syracuse being publicly owned with local stockholders, you know, so fans, you know, actually owning a share in the team. So there's a real sense of pride and ownership in baseball around here. And, the demographics of the region have changed in a lot of these cities, these industrial era boom times followed by a bit of a post-industrial collapse and then reinvention. And so the future of baseball has not always been secured in some of these places, but I think that deeply ingrained love of baseball and its long history has helped keep it going. And you can definitely meet people who've been enjoying it their whole lives, whose parents, grandparents, great-grandparents were also huge baseball fans and who see it as, a big part of their identity and something that's very, very important to the region.
That's another thing I was going to ask you about, is that is one of the very few places in the country in which we do have publicly owned teams. And if you can expound on that a little bit and explain, to people who are new to the podcast, maybe I think in the pre-MLB takeover era of minor league baseball, we talked about this, but there are teams that are community owned out there, which is not something that's super common across minor league baseball. What does that mean to those fan bases, that it's not just, oh yeah, we grow up, cheering for these teams and going to these games and all that, but actually this is a community staple because this is something that people take literal ownership in, as opposed to just, a fans type of ownership?
Yeah, well, in Syracuse, the Mets own the team now, but I think part of that sale was literally, fans cashing out on, shares of the team that had been in their family for decades and decades. And, in Rochester, the number, I forget what it is, but the number 8,000 something is retired at the ballpark for a man named Maury Silver, who led a stock drive to save the team when it was in danger of moving. And that's the number of shares that he sold in the team. So it's not a very common thing now, community ownership. We should see it in like smaller environments in the Midwest League as well. I know Beloit had that going for a while. Wisconsin Timber Rattlers had that going for a while in Appleton. But I think it speaks to an era of minor league baseball, where it was, a little not as big money, more grassroots, and, it's still grassroots, but even more grassroots, where having a team really was an example of putting your money where your mouth is. Your mouth is always in the same place. And ponying up and owning a share in the team. And that gives you a sense of pride. You even see that with, today, with like Green Bay. I know if you own a share in the Green Bay Packers, it's largely symbolic, but I still think that gives people such a sense of ownership. And it's just such a cool memento to have this, certificate that says, hey, I'm a part owner of a team, of a professional sports team. And this shows how much I care about it, or how much my family has cared about it through the years.
Yeah. And Ben, I wanted to ask about, their first two stops on this trip are both Mets affiliates in Central and Western New York. I know it's a touchy subject to talk about what the region is actually called, but Syracuse and Binghamton being not within the same state as New York, but still a few hours away. But what is it like to see Mets fandom there? I know Binghamton's been a Mets affiliate for a while, Syracuse since 2019. I was watching a clip of Terry Collins the other day, and it was weird to see him talk about, like, we'll call some guys up from Las Vegas, remembering what that time was like when Mets had to call up guys from the entire other coast. But how much does Mets fandom affect folks up in that particular area? Because I think they're probably technically closer to Toronto than they are New York City.
Yeah, I think in Syracuse you have a mix of Blue Jays fans, but also a lot of Yankees and Mets fans. I think that's, I don't want to say a problem, but the fact that there's always been two, New York-based major league teams makes it so, Syracuse or Binghamton, they often have fans of the Yankees and not the Mets specifically, which might make it hard for local fans. I talked to some of them, local fans who are Yankees fans at the major league level, but then find themselves rooting for, a Mets affiliate, and then kind of feeling conflicted when, a Subway Series, or an extreme example, the 2000 World Series, being conflicted because it's like, oh, these are these guys I saw come up through the system and I love them, but also the Yankees are my team. So it does create a bit of that disconnect, but also there's it's New York. It's still New York State. And even though we're a couple of hours away from New York City, there's obviously a lot of Mets fans here. So if you are a Mets fan in Central New York, what a great situation that you have the AAA and AA affiliates within roughly an hour drive of one another. I was thinking this on the drive yesterday between Syracuse and Binghamton. I was like, I don't know. I have to look at a map, but I don't know what kind of town is, equidistant from Syracuse and Binghamton, but how cool it would be if you're a Mets fan who could drive, 25 miles north and see the AAA team, or drive 25 miles south and see the AA team. So there's a lot of opportunities there from a fan level to root for these players before they get to Queens. And then I was thinking to myself in the car, I was like, this is just a larger philosophical question. Would you rather live 25 miles away from 2 minor league teams or within 5 miles of 1 minor league team? You know, people are going to have different opinions. Would you rather be real close to one, so it's just super easy to get there all the time? Or would you rather have a little bit of a drive to get to 2? But here in central New York, you do have a lot of options, and Syracuse and Binghamton are obviously 2 prominent ones.
All right, Ben, we'll preview what else is coming on the trip. I know you have that stop to Moosic/Scranton - Wilkes-Barre. What else are you looking forward to the rest of the way?
Yeah, well, I won't be in Binghamton much longer, but it was great to be in Binghamton last night, especially because, that is a team, just like the Erie Seawolves, also in the Eastern League, that when the reorganization of minor league baseball was happening, there was a lot of uncertainty and angst that, this team would, maybe continue or not continue as an affiliated team. So to be in Binghamton is great. To see a smaller market with an older ballpark built in 1992, still hosting minor league baseball is great. And I just really like those kind of towns and communities. But then, yes, moving on to, as you said, technically Moosic, PA, but that is home of the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders. I'll be there on Thursday, today, as we're speaking, August 3rd. And I'm looking forward to that. As I mentioned in the past, my first minor league game as a kid were in the late 80s, early 90s, seeing the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons. So I have a, kind of a emotional, personal connection to the region and to that ballpark, even though the ballpark I went to in the late 80s and early 90s was essentially like torn down and then rebuilt, but it's in the same place and it's still a AAA International League franchise. It was the Phillies when I was a kid, and now it's the Yankees. The Rail Riders are a AAA Yankees affiliate. And then I will go see the Phillies AAA affiliate in Allentown, Pennsylvania, Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs on Friday, August 4th. And they are playing as the Scrapple, paying homage to a fried meat mush, which it's a very minor league baseball thing to do. But looking forward to being back in Lehigh Valley. And that's a team that's obviously just pretty much killed it from their debut in 2008, just one of the strongest minor league franchises out there. And for me, who grew up in suburban Philadelphia, I do have, again, a little bit more of a connection to these areas. I don't feel like I'm at home necessarily, but a trip like this feels local to me from a minor league ballpark road trip perspective. So I feel a little more relaxed than I do when I'm, flying somewhere and renting a car and in somewhere, totally new to me or just a region I'm not as familiar with.
Benjamin Hill, who is on the road right now. Ben, travel safe. Enjoy the rest of the trip, and I can't wait to hear all about the remaining pieces of it when you return to the office / the normal Zoom setup next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being home and looking forward to then getting back on the road and, all the conflicting emotions of handling day-to-day life during the season. But for right now, it's great talking to you guys from Binghamton, New York, Recreation Park, which, by the way, is on Beethoven Street. That's another thing I have to look into. Why is this street in Binghamton, New York named Beethoven Street?
Beethoven Street,
maybe
named after a man composing his future in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe there's just other people named Beethoven out there. I mean, Beethoven can't be the only Beethoven. We just think Beethoven, that just means one person. Like
this is like a Fred Beethoven. This is a guy just like he owned a service station down the street in Binghamton. He was a pillar of the community. Fred Beethoven.
Yeah, it might be him. So if it is Fred Beethoven, like shout out to you. You got a street named after you, and you might not have been a Ludwig, but hey, you did pretty well for yourself.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you're in a major area of the city.
Yeah, that joke fell a little flat, Sam.
I thought it was sharp, but that's just me.
Oh, no, you're a sharp guy.
I thought my Twilight Zone impression was going to be the worst thing about the end of this segment.
Music jokes. We'll give it a rest.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
Interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Miners. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the Miners, in which all of you out there in Radio Land must identify the legitimate historical ball club hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One once ran amok on the base paths. The others never went anywhere at all. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball teams did at one time exist. A, the Elkhart Eagle Eyes. B, the Beaver Falls Bees. C, the Caribou Bear Cubs. Haven't you been busy if you picked B, the Beaver Falls Bees?
Not the bees! Ah! Oh, my eyes! Eyes! Ah!
Who buzzed about the Pennsylvania State Association from 1937 to 1941. Beaver Falls, the finest dam city in the Keystone State's Beaver County, lies along the Beaver River, just a few miles north of its confluence with the Ohio River, which is in turn just a couple dozen miles north-northwest of Pittsburgh. You may think that in the backyard of such a historically great baseball city, the Bees could not have been the first Miners franchise to take flight. You may be right. As far back as 1907, Beaver Falls begat the Beaver Falls Beavers of the Western Pennsylvania League. But our Beavers Falls team came into being with an affiliation of the Boston National League team, known as the Boston Braves for most of its history, but rebranding as the Boston Bees, a name that came from the fans, from 1936, the year before the Beaver Falls Bees were birthed, through 1940. The Pennsylvania State Association sought to expand from 6 teams to 8 teams ahead of the 36 campaign, with Beaver Falls a likely newcomer as a Reds affiliate if the school board could be persuaded to lease the high school field to a minors team instead of the usual industrial team that played there. New Kensington and Ford City were also in play for a new association club, but as things turned out, the circuit only managed 6 teams again, looking exactly the same as it did in 35, save for the Jeanette Little Pirates replacing the Washington Generals. But that was all under the bridge when our Beaver Falls Bees debuted in 37, cross-pollinating with the Greensburg Green Sox, the Butler Yankees, the Monessen Cardinals, the Jeanette Bisons, and the McKeesport Tubers for a third-place finish. In 38, the Beaver Falls Club played under the umbrella and the name of the St. Louis American League team. And the team would buzz back and forth between being called the Browns and the Bees over the seasons to come. Bees again in 39, Browns again in 40, Bees again in 41. The identity crisis was hardly the only conflict Beaver Falls fell into. On June 6, 1940, player-manager Frank Oshiek got into a violent altercation with umpire Len Buger. Only those present, if those, can say exactly what happened, but the team's chairman, W.E. Milliken, and business manager R.J. Stoops contacted the police and signed an arrest warrant against the ump. The police hauled Buger away from home plate and held him in custody for several hours as he was unable to pay bail, and was only released upon signing a statement accepting blame for the fight. Elmer Daly, president of the Pennsylvania State Association, fined Oshiek $50 and, despite threats that the Beaver Falls team would withdraw from the league, suspended him for 10 days. But Daly also suspended Buger, the ump, for 90 days. During the 40-41 offseason, to the outrage of Daly, Baseball Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis investigated the incident and, citing the need to protect umpires in the minor leagues, not only ordered the league officially revoke Buger's suspension, but pay him in full. That was a hill of beans compared to the rest of K. Mountain Landis's decree. That Oshiek and Beaver Falls team president Reverend Father Casey be suspended for a year, and Milliken and Stoops, the club officials who signed the arrest warrant on Buger, be banned for 5 years. The Beaver Falls organization was also fined $500, or over 10,000 bones in 2023 dollars. But the war between Beaver Falls, Buger, and the head of baseball was only a bit of a brouhaha in the shadow of global events. The societal demands of World War II stopped many minor leagues altogether in 42 and cut the Pennsylvania State Association down to 4 clubs, Beaver Falls not being one of them. In 43, the league never got started, and it never formed again after the war either. And thus ended the flight of the Bees of Beaver Falls. Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these clubs whiled away the hours in the minors of yesteryear? A. The Canton Watchmakers. B. The Newbern Cuckoo Clocks. C. The Cairo Sundials. Want to know the answer? Check the time. Or tune in for the next Ghosts of the Minors. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is out on the town with Enrico Caruso, and their conversation is about to take on a new tenor.
And wrapping up this week's episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, big thanks to Josh Jackson for stopping by. And before we get out of here, minor league baseball showcases its best and brightest on MILB.TV. And of course, minor leagues on MLB TV. Sam, what are you watching for free this week or not for free this week? What are you watching on MILB.TV?
Yeah. So this weekend, I have been told Dylan Cruz is going to Fredericksburg. Now they said this when he signed, like they're not going to skip him above Fredericksburg because they would send him to high A Wilmington, which he could easily do well at. But like Wilmington is such a pitcher's park. They don't want him going there and like hitting 210 over 10 games. I don't think Dylan Cruz can hit 210 anywhere, but still they want him getting in on the ground floor, getting a good base of pro success. So they're going to have him at Fredericksburg. I'm told he's going to debut this weekend, which is great because this weekend Fredericksburg is in Fredericksburg and will be on MILB TV. So keep an eye out for news on which day he's exactly going to be debuting. But he should be there this weekend. The LSU star helped the Bayou Bengals win a national title, number 2 overall pick. Some people thought he was the best overall talent in the draft. Other people thought it was his LSU teammate, Paul Skeens. Judge for yourself. Get to see him in pro ball this weekend, Dylan Cruz. So keep an eye out for that Fredericksburg broadcast. And it's also, just as an aside, Fredericksburg's broadcast is very good. It's very crisp and clean, especially for the single A level. They do a good job of showing velos on the board, which is great, especially if you're watching a Harleen Susana start, because that guy can hit 102 with no problem. Doesn't always know where it's going, but it's fun to watch. So yeah, tune into Fredericksburg at some point this weekend and catch you some Dylan Cruz. Tyler, you're watching another really, really gifted outfielder.
Yeah, and a couple of very, very gifted prospects, number ones in each system. Toledo, the Detroit Tigers AAA affiliate, will be taking on Iowa, the Chicago Cubs AAA affiliate. Top-ranked Cubs prospect Pete Crow Armstrong up at AAA for the first time this week. He will be in action, and top-ranked Tigers prospect Colt Keith will be on the field for the Toledo Mud Hens. Pete Crow Armstrong, the number 7 overall prospect in baseball. He hit 307, 391, 640 in July, hit 5 homers, got the promotion to AAA Iowa. And MLB's number 38 prospect is that very top-ranked Tigers talent, Colt Keith, who was promoted to AAA at the end of June. So 2 guys who were in the early days of their AAA stays. Colt Keith not quite as much as PCA, but those 2 guys will be going at it this weekend on MILB.TV. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. For Sam Dykstra, for Benjamin Hill, for Josh Jackson, and the rest of our crew at MILB, my name is Tyler Mon. We'll catch you next week.